Alrighty, guys, what's going on? Hope everyone had a great weekend. We're now going into a very compelling week. Obviously, a very volatile week, but one that I've been looking forward to for a while now. We all kind of knew the September 8th deadline was the window of non-strength to potentially play out. Really didn't see much occur in this time frame. So once again, supportive flows are strongest the week of OPEX. So I do have a little bit of a long bias, and I expect the long bias or continuation to the upside to keep going. Furthermore, up into October, November, and December, right? November, December, likely going to be our strongest months, and then that beginning of the new year, obviously we'll start to see a lot of the open interest for that January and December OPEX start to fade away, and then we can I guess, assess where the market's at, how it looks, potentially look for a top then, but as of right now, right, expected move or the implied move for the week are within the parameters here established at these black lines. So 643.93 is the low end of the implied move, and 670.89 is the upside implied move. So right around 2% either way. As I said, I'd expect any weakness Monday, Tuesday to be dip buys opportunities, and then look for a continuation to the upside. Rather than trading SPY or an individual indice or index, I would rather just trade individual names. So that's kind of what we're going to jump into. You guys kind of know, right? Took some good ads on IBIT here. IBIT was a really good chart. I was kind of looking for it off of the 61.75 spot and or a break above this 63.70 mark, right? This is kind of the range that I was looking for. Or you could have tied it up into this gap up here, right? However you looked at this, was all very valid. I had a little bit later of an entry where I was looking off 64.50. Like I said, it was viable off of the spot down here at 61. It was just a little bit late to that, but kind of just basing a lot of the idea off of this here, right? We got a kind of like a breakdown underneath this gap. We retested some of these old weekly levels, right? And then we reclaimed the gap at 64.50 pretty cleanly, right? We had like a nice little tight spread bar, as you guys can see here on September 10th. We had another inside bar, maybe not an inside bar, but slightly breaking over the previous high. I took my position right around these 2 days here from Thursday and Wednesday, and then we had a really nice continuation bar here on Friday. Looks like in after hours, this broke down a little bit back to like 64.5. I still think this trade idea, or I'm sorry, 65.5 here in overnight session, but I still think this idea is really valid as long as it holds 64.50, right? As long as we hold 64.50, I'm looking for a push up into this spot here. So if we look from the open to the previous close, right? So somewhere between 67 to 69.84, I'm looking for this to break into the gap and then see a nice continuation, right? Potentially even making new highs through 69.94 or 69.84, which is why I chose like the 75 strike. But yeah, this chart still looks really good. Willing to buy dips if we can get it. We haven't really got like any kind of pullback bar or any kind of pullback sequence where this pulls back over a series of hours or days, that pulls back and retests this spot and validates it as like a higher low. Like I said, it was just two inside bars that really just based and established against that level. So still open to a pullback, but yeah, looking for dip buys against 64.50, and then looking for a continuation up into the gap, whether it bases the gap, right, something like that, or if it ends up giving us a high type flag with resistance at the gap, right? So if it does something like this, where it pops up and hits and then pulls back, that's another add opportunity. All in all, right, we're looking for a continuation into 69.84. Really nice chart here, guys. This looks really healthy. Harmonic breakout volume as well, where we saw a continuation off of these lows here, so that's really healthy. Strong bar or weekly close at the highs, always a good indication as well. We just need to see how it reacts to that gap at 67.21, and if we do see a pullback, is it on divergence? Does it hold 64.50, right? And that's really key here. So this is one of my top focuses. I would like, if we open around 65.50 or somewhere near this gap around low 65s, would like another 10 contract add to pull myself to about 20 contracts, maybe even get to the 30 contract mark. A lot of this is all predicated on FOMC, right? So I want to have my position built before FOMC on Wednesday. So hopefully there's some kind of weakness on Monday, Tuesday that is mitigated right around this 65 spot. I would be happily add into that and then risk 64.50. And like I said, look for continuation to 67 and 69. That's probably my top focus right now, if I'm being completely honest. There was a couple things here on Tesla. I was kind of looking for the break above 367.34, which was, I guess there was these lower highs here on the daily and weekly. You guys can clearly see from here and here. It did kind of open slightly above that level. Didn't really give a pullback. It was a very, very small pullback. If anything, you guys can see the open was right there at that candle low. That little wick was the lowest it went. So not a true pullback and retest, but it was kind of just like a gap and go situation. I did take something off of alerts. I took like 2 contracts of this, but I thought it would give me a pullback, and I was going to alert it if it pulled back a little bit lower with some more size and a little more conviction. All in all, I think this trade's over with, so I might take this off the watch list. I was thinking maybe it would give another pullback here, where it pulled back and based this 383.68 gap, and then we could look for a finalization up into 404.60. But in overnight session, this is already at 405. So really, I think this trade is now done. If it can create some kind of support here within this gap, right? Let's say it hits this spot and it pulls all the way back down, and then it builds out a support here. I think there's a trade that could set up that takes it all the way back up, right, to the top of this gap, bases that gap, and then we have a whole new spot or range that we can trade with, right, which would be 383 to 405, where we then can look for a move all the way up into this 450 mark, right? So 413 is the top of the gap to 449.52. This is the spot I'd be looking to target if we can get some kind of a build out of support in this gap range, right, from 383 to 405. But anything, I guess, in the short term, it's kind of off the books. So my bad, that trade kind of like slipped away really quickly. So Tesla's not going to be on the watch list as of right now. Just going to be watching this over the next couple days or weeks. Still think this could set up a nice December move or January move, but this range here at the 405 mark is currently done. Moving on, right, UNH, another focus here. Kind of getting the look I wanted, right? I mentioned like this consolidation was a little bit risky. I wanted to see how it looked if we pushed up into 335. Do we get like a touch of this? This is why I have this formation drawn out. Do we get a touch of this, and does it pull back and base these old highs? Do we break above this level at 335 and then pull back? It looks like it breached 335, right? We're now in the middle of this gap here in the 360s, and we saw a little bit of a stagnation here, right? So I'm kind of looking and hoping that we can see a continued sell-off back down into 335, right, and then base the top of this gap here. And if it can hold, I would like to look at 380 calls. I think this is where I can introduce options into the current shares that I have in my port. Be a nice little options trade that we can set up here. Risk would then be right around like 335, potentially into this gap fill here, so we can remove some of this stuff now. We could look and maybe risk like 335 to 332, which is the open from this big gap up in this consolidation. But yeah, would like to see some continued weakness here down into 335. If it can hold here, 335 to 332, I would look for calls into the 380 mark. And this, once again, this chart has a long way to go. I fully expect, guys, and I've been very transparent with this one, I expect shares to carry a majority of the position for this, right? I don't think options are going to be entirely viable all the way through. Obviously, you're going to have theta kind of play a role. I expect more consolidations. Premiums are getting a little bit expensive, right? So I think the pullbacks are opportunities to trade within these finite ranges to be able to fulfill it to the gaps that it has. But for the most part, a lot of this is share based. But good opportunity here if it can pull back to 335. I would look for 380 calls for probably like I don't know, November would probably be the best option, or late October. So still keeping this on watch here. One other one that I'm looking at is Meta, right? Meta was initially like a bearish idea. We caught a decent portion of it down here in this little breakdown, but obviously we've kind of broken back above. And however you guys want to draw this, it's not always going to be perfect. We saw this with the IBIT chart as well. But if you take a look from back here on this like weekly high, right around here from February, we clearly had a top put in, it pulled down, made a kind of like a new low against a lot of the old prior higher lows. We pushed up again, we had a double top, we pulled back down for a higher low. This has been a really contentious point right around like 740 to like 747. However you want to draw it, right? It doesn't have to be picture perfect because, you guys can clearly see it did breach underneath this 740 spot from back here in February. But now it's reclaimed back above that. It's also reclaimed back above this double top part from like June 30th. And now we have this really nice consolidation right around here, guys, where we have, pretty much a trend line breakout, if you guys want to draw it that way. However you want to take a look at it, right? We're really basing against the 747 and 740 flat spot, right? Really nice risk opportunity, in my opinion, where you can really risk and even pull the parameters of this trade down a little bit lower into this gap at 737, where you can look at this as essentially all like a little buy zone, right? And I think the risk to reward here is magnificent, looking for either, if we have some weakness on Monday, Tuesday, looking to be buying calls into 737 and throughout 747, so a 10-point range that you can kind of be buying and tranching into as we come down, and then looking for a pop out, a base, and then continuation up. Or if we see strength on Monday, Tuesday, right? Or some kind of gap up, you could really just look for a break over this daily lower high, right? So somewhere right around here. However you guys want to draw it, it doesn't have to be picture perfect, but at the top of that would be 766.51. If we can break above that, right, this is a pretty nice sequence that we have, breaching through the daily high or lower highs. Then you could look for a push all the way back up, right, into this this little gap here, right? So going from the open, why is it doing that? Let's draw this as black. 775 to 785, right? So a 10-point gap that we can attack here. Entry would be 766. Obviously, if we break above, and you could look for a move for about 2.4, 2.5%, $18 or so, probably 2 weeks out. I think this is the time frame that it could definitely play out within. So yeah, looking for like 780 calls, 785 calls, 2-3 weeks out. Once we get a break above 766, or like I said, if we pull back down into 747, probably start a starter size position at 747, add the bulk of my position at 737, and then look for a pop, and reclaiming each previous support level. It really kind of, I would say 747 is the big spot that I would have to reclaim, right? So if it were to break down, look for a reclaim of that spot, and then kind of the same thing that we have now. Big name here. I think this name has a lot of potential. So once again, looking for 780, 785 calls on Meta. And the coin, right? Coin's another big one. Don't really see a lot of people talking about it. I think a lot of people got caught buying the highs here. But really nice setup, right? Kind of the same thing where we kind of broke down. We've been consolidating now since August 1st in this really tight range, right? I would say this is a tight range for coin, and really just kind of looking for a break above 335. If we can break 335, right, and get some kind of a pullback in base here, this would be a base of a bearish gap down, right? So really big critical spot here at 335.14, or if they can't get it back below, I think this has a nice trend opportunity back up into 377. If we were able to catch this, right, once again, this would be about a 12.73, 12, maybe just round it up to 13% move here for about $42. Yeah, that would be a really nice trade as well. Coin hasn't really traded the best. I was kind of looking at MSTR, if you guys saw my post from last week as well. This one is a little bit more difficult, where you don't have a tight consolidation with a real definitive baseline bottom. This one is more of like a falling wedge, so it's a little bit harder to base or assess risk off of. But if this were to reclaim 358, there's potential for this trade to make its way back up into a similar gap fill around like 389.72. Just chart is a little bit more difficult. MSTR hasn't been trading the best as well since a lot's been going on with that stock, but coin is definitely up there. I would still prefer to have more exposure in IBIT, but if I'm going to take a couple throwaway cons, don't be surprised if I take some coin 380 calls for November, December. If we do crack above and hold 335. Probably going to be taking some 380 calls on coin here. I really like this chart. Has a lot of opportunity if you can rebase that. And just taking a look at like the weekly chart as well, right? A lot of this, the volume, especially off of this candle here, August 11th, it was a retest of the gap, had a shooting star off of the gap. This candle should have reversed and made a new low. And technically it did, but it was bought back up, right? Where we didn't really see high volume kicking in at the lows, symbolizing like a breakdown. And that wasn't really, paired well with the bearish bar. It was low volume, wicks get rebought back up, closes near the highs, right? So not really an indication that sellers want to be pushing this further down. It just looks like a weak attempt in my opinion. And then once again, right, the next following two weekly bars made kind of not new lows, but they pushed towards the lows, and we really didn't see anything stepping in to push this lower. You guys can see volume decreased, and there really wasn't much of an emphasis on trying to get this lower, right? So low effort equals low result will likely reverse and push back up to reinvigorate sellers at the highs. I think an easy target here is that 377 gap. And you guys can see, right, the reversal off of this low effort, low result was a higher volume bar that pushed back up towards the highs and closed relatively close to the highs. So really just looking for a push over 335. Ideally, it doesn't on harmonic volume, right? So it breaks out on high volume and then it pulls back and bases on low volume, right? Giving, once again, indication that sellers don't have control. They cannot force the stock lower, right? And it just mitigates right against 335. That's why I draw things the way I do, right? Just looking for a breakout through that spot, pull back and hold, and then I think we can get in right there. Obviously right against 335 would be perfect. And then, yeah, looking for a continuation of 380. So those are the real main ones that I'm looking at. Obviously, I still have AMD short Decembers. I haven't really done anything with this just yet. The stock looked good, right? I had that stop loss right around like 160, 179. We got to close below it, and we pushed back down to the bottom of the gap. And so far, right, we had two inside bars. It's consolidating here. I'll stop out if this gets above 160, 179, or if this breaks below 153.75, which is this gap fill from back here. Obviously, you guys can see I've had this marked for a while now. If it can break back below that, I would happily add, right, into this position, make it maybe like 15 contracts at that point from the current 7 that I have, and then look for a push down into 146. But as of right now, this is still kind of a hands-off stock. We might even be able to change this up a little bit since this looks like a lower high on the daily, where we can, instead of risking 161, we could really just risk 164.53, which is this daily lower high right here, just to make it a little bit easier, give it a little bit more flexibility or breathing room. But AMD is still kind of hands off until we get FOMC. We kind of see the direction that the market wants to move, and then maybe after OPEX, right, kind of position ourselves a little more accordingly. And I did say this, right? We did have flows coming back into the market after September 8th. Those will start to mitigate after this OPEX here on Friday. So I expected a 2-week bounce. If AMD really doesn't participate in a market bounce and it doesn't break over this 164.53, I would see that as a potential sign of weakness, right, where it's not really cooperating with the rest of the market, and we could see a really, really nice divergence from the market where this sells or has continued weakness and it just keeps making lower high after lower high, and while the rest of the market either stagnates or continues to slowly grind up. I don't know. AMD still a really, really interesting chart here. So just kind of hands off until I would say either Wednesday or Friday, and then after this week, I'll kind of be able to make a more decisive decision. But for the week being, right, this week, Meta is probably the focus. I would say Coin and then IBIT, right, are the main three that I'm watching. UNH, obviously, something I'm looking at as well, but I just expect this to take a little bit longer, and I still would rather buy weakness here. I don't really see anything that, garners me buying the highs. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be buying up here in the midpoint of a gap. I have to have this pullback into 335. So for the most immediate stuff, right, buying into strength would have to be Coin, it would have to be IBIT, or Meta, right? Those are the main three that I'm watching. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a good week. I'll be alerting all my trades. I'll be doing the stuff that I always do, kind of looking at the calendar as well. You guys should see, right, this week here. Sorry, I was behind a week. Nothing on Monday. As I said, Mondays are always interesting to watch. Do we have an NWOG? Do we gap down? Do we gap up? Are we seeing dark pool bids or are we seeing dark pool sells, right? Are they trying to lift the market higher by placing the asks up higher to kind of force market to go to those sell orders? Or is it obviously gapping up and they're bidding down to force market to come lower into those bids? We'll have to see what ends up happening on Monday. But Tuesday, obviously, is the day before FOMC, so I expect the market to really chop around and a lot of positioning be settled before FOMC itself. And then on Wednesday, right, we do have FOMC, so we'll see if they cut rates or they end up kind of stalling or pausing. I think the rate cut probability is like right around 97, 98%. So don't be surprised if we do see a rate cut and a very, very quick spike to the upside. It could obviously sell, but I would expect the market to go up short term from this decision. Long term, I do think that we'll see it play out a little bit differently, but we'll have to see. So 11 o'clock my time, so that would be 2 o'clock for East Coasters. And then Thursday, no data. And then Friday, we do have OPEX, right? So typically on the FOMC OPEX days, right, there is something that kind of pulls my attention to SPX, right? I've been trying to avoid SPX just because the market's been slowly grinding up. We really haven't had any big dips that are viable, or these crazy up days where we can short. So we'll have to see if FOMC gives a really strong move to one side, or if there's something that I see in the beginning of the week from like a gap down or a gap up. But usually on these weeks are some of the best times to be trading SPX. And that SPX usually shows its hand here, right? There's a lot of IV and a lot of volatility baked into the pre-decision, right? And then once we see the decision, whatever that interest rate cut is, and then Powell talks, right? There's an IV reset. So what is not known becomes known, right? And then IV ends up kind of resetting itself, and usually there's some kind of big move, right? It goes really quickly up, IV resets, contracts end up reducing and coming back to their true value, or it goes down, same exact thing, and then that gives a really good opportunity for an entry. So if there is an SPX trade, ideally it comes right around Wednesday after the FOMC decision, right? And then in that 30-minute window between 11 and 11:30. So if you guys want to have an SPX trade or are looking for like a SPY trade, it'll probably come in this 30-minute window between the decision and then when Powell ends up talking, right? Now, I'm willing to bet it to the upside. We'll have to see. Things could change. Be like water. Don't be, dogmatic in the way you think. I'll obviously be providing updates as well, but probably an SPX trade somewhere in between this 30-minute window. Sorry, I've been talking for a little bit now. How long has it been? 20 minutes. But yeah, that's what I'm going to be looking at for SPX, or something that's a little more volatile. But pretty much decision should be made by Monday, Tuesday. Kind of see what happens Wednesday. I'll adjust positions if necessary, and I'll be watching for an SPX trade in that 30-minute window. And then going into Thursday, Friday, there should be something that sets up on the day of OPEX, or I'll find something prior to OPEX. And then after OPEX, I'm willing to buy dips once again until October, and kind of just rinse and repeat, because I do think the market keeps going up into January / December. So that's going to be it, guys, for my video. I hope everyone had a good weekend once again. I'm very excited for this week. I've been slowly climbing back. You guys have been seeing it, right? Just shy of 20K after I had been down about 15K from my April rally. So it feels good. I finally got rid of that SPY position. Hopefully everybody saw that. I did post it in the chat. Got rid of the SPY bag that I've been holding for a little bit now. I lost about like 11K on it, maybe 12. But I told you guys I've been kind of trading around that. I never really added to that. So all in all, I think I've upped like 15, 17K. Pretty much every day now I've been making about 1,000. And then IBIT, the Tesla trade that I didn't alert, just for transparency. Like I said, I only took 2 of them. I was waiting for a pullback to get us a better opportunity, but it is what it is. And then UNH, I have shares of that as well. So, I've been doing pretty well. But this is a big week, man. I think this is really going to set up a lot of opportunity in Bitcoin-oriented names. And then obviously Meta, the chart looks fantastic. Coin looks fantastic. IBIT looks fantastic. UNH, still one of my favorite charts. It just needs a little bit of a pullback here. So that would be really nice if we can catch that and then be able to transition to options and pair with the shares that we have. So that's going to be it, guys. I think I deserve some water after talking that long and that quickly. Hopefully I wasn't too quick. But yeah, that's pretty much the scan this week. So I'll see you guys on Monday. I'll be in the chat. I'll be kind of updating like what I see. If there is some kind of SPY or SPX trade setting up on Monday, Tuesday, I'll obviously be alerting if what I'm going to be doing with IBIT, if I like coin, providing updates on UNH. Seeing what AMD does. Does it have a strong tape? Does it have a weak tape? Okay, this is my risk. Okay, this is getting close to risk. I'm going to cut this. I'm going to give it a daily. I try to update you guys as much as I can. So just want to see what ends up happening Wednesday through Friday for that AMD position. And then throughout the way, I'll be updating IBIT and some of the other potential names. So That is going to be it. Hopefully that update helps. But yeah, I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow morning, bright and early. And yeah, I'll see. Hopefully we have a good week, man. Try to be careful. FOMC is always very, very risky. Try not to front run news too much. Try not to be super reactionary based off of, if we do cut rates and you see the market going crazy and you start to buy calls frantically, and then IV drops and you're red, that's, yeah, and you don't want that to happen on top of a pullback. Just be very, very careful with sizing during this week. Let things settle. If you are going to go super aggressive, I'd wait for the rate cut decision to happen, and then right in that that 30-minute window leading into Powell, that's your opportunity, in my opinion. And then obviously OPEX day will provide something as well. So that's going to be it for you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning.